Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, the wife of an ex-Palau president has been released. Also,
I'm quite pleased to see and hear the Treasurer's budget speech on the reduction.
PNG's government is dropping GST from basic food items, and
there's a lot of programs out there where they send in teams of people that are trying to help and trying to make a difference.
Biomedical students head to Tonga for a training mission. The wife of a former Palau president has been released a day after being arrested upon entry at the Saipan International Airport. Krista Toribiong was arrested at the airport in relation to criminal charges filed against her in the state of Texas, including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, specifically a firearm. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
RNZ Pacific's Northern Mariana Islands correspondent Mark Rabigo says Krista Toribiong made a good decision travelling to Saipan, where she can't be reached by the law of Texas. Mr. Rabigo says even though the CNMI is a US territory, it's not a US state.
She played this well. She went to somewhere where Texas cannot reach her. And what better place than Saipan, which is a few hours away from Palau. And she's a persona non grata in Palau. She undesirable there, so she cannot land there.
The Department of Public Safety told local media they were not able to confirm the purpose of Mrs. Toribiong's visit to the Northern Mariana Islands. Mr. Rabigo says he doesn't know what the details are surrounding her charge.
No idea. He tried to scour the internet for information. It's in the docket or somewhere to get a hold of that. But eventually, this will come to light and we'll find out what's the charge.
Mrs. Toribiong is married to former Palau President Johnson Toribiong, but she's not allowed to go to Palau because she was listed as an undesirable alien in 2022. In May of this year, Mrs. Toribiong sued Palau's president, Seringil Whips Jr., in his personal and official capacity before a US federal court in Texas for the ban. Mrs. Toribiong argues she was unlawfully put on the blacklist under the rules of the Compact of Free Association.
A Papua New Guinea academic has welcomed the move by the government to drop the goods and services tax from many basic food items. The government announced in its budget that it was cutting the 10% GST on products like rice, tinned fish, tea, coffee, flour and noodles. Andrew Anton Mako, who is with the University of PNG and the Australian National University's Development Policy Centre, had earlier called on the government to make such a move to ease the pressure on those on low incomes. He spoke with Don Wiseman.
I'm quite pleased to see and hear the Treasurer's budget speech on the reduction of GST for basic food items. I think the basic food items that are listed, except for chicken, all of them are the food items and essential things that low-income earners would usually spend their income on. So I'm glad to see the PNG government take on board the recommendations that we put forward to, and it will cost about 210 million kina.
So how are they replacing that?
I think revenue is actually been growing. If you look at the overall revenue, it has actually outpaced expenditure side of things. So I think this is a good concession that the government is making, and it's going directly to the low-income earners. So I'm glad. If I may add, they would have done more. I thought they would have also included items like medicines, basic medicines, because even in Papua New Guinea, where, public health is free, but we have over the years seen that and witnessed that for obvious reasons, basic medicines and sometimes are not stocked in the health centers and clinics around the country. So usually the doctors would write a prescription for patients and then they take them to the private pharmacies and all that. So if they could have also removed the GST on medicines that would treat common illness like malaria, that would have been good as well.
Given how tough things are, removing this charge of 10%, does it actually make that much difference? They're still in a hell of a situation, aren't they?
You're right in that. Things are tough at the moment. The cost of goods and services in PNG is still high, even though inflation is projected to come down. Because PNG is always a high-cost economy where the cost of basic food items and the cost of service delivery is still higher. So it's a structural issue that a country is facing. Zero rating of GST on basic food items is important, but it should be a short-term measure. The long-term measure is to basically look at the structure of the economy, so the cost of goods and delivering goods and services actually drops. So the reform should be on the cost of service delivery in the country.
Now, in terms of other things that came up in the budget, as always, I suppose, a significant amount of money going into health and education, but still nowhere near what the country needs, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Now, PNGs and over the years, if we go back to independence and all that, service delivery in the country has been falling, right? Many rural areas in Papua New Guinea has been collapsing, right? That's a reason why we see many people moving to the cities and towns in Papua New Guinea, because simply there is non-existent of services in the country. But I would say it's a big ask of the country. But I think the government is spending money, but I think the way it is spending money, I think they should do a bit better than that. For example, the government is actually giving about 2 billion kina, more than 2 billion kina a year to the MPs as slush funds. As the name suggests, it is slush funds. It is the spending of these 2 billion kina or so is dependent on the MPs themselves, because the governance around it is quite loose. So I think the government could do better than that, right? They're spending money, but I think the way they're spending is not in the right places. But I get you, Don, that more could be done in the country because the rural areas in Papua New Guinea has been collapsing.
Well, the other thing, of course, is in terms of generating more income for government, as you say, their income is coming up, but to what extent are they generating more income?
The revenue, the total revenue of the government is increasing, and when we compare it with last year, but I think most of it is coming from the high prices of PNG's exports, right? So if export prices drop, then it will put a lot of pressure on revenue. So I think the important thing, I think it will be to look at the structure of the economy at the moment. At the moment, the budget and the structure of the economy is carried mostly by the resources sector. So when the resources sector does better, the PNG economy does better, revenues do better. So I think it is to shift away from that. So it is a structural change that the country needs to make. So it requires a lot of reforms to make sure that the other important sectors like agriculture, fisheries, and other sectors that support the bulk of the economy is also strengthened as well. So if the growth of revenue and growth of the economy is driven by the non-resources sector, then that's sustainable going forward.
A group of 8 biomedical engineering students from the University of Canterbury are heading to Tonga in January to train staff to maintain essential medical equipment. Mechanical Engineering Associate Professor Debbie Munro took a group of students prior to COVID-19 to identify what support was needed. She told Caleb Fotheringham, as well as helping Tonga, it's an eye-opener for students.
I went in July for a scoping visit just to see if the needs were the same or different. And my own feelings after having been to Tonga in 2019 and 20 was that the problem isn't really support for repairing equipment, but people resources to deal with all of the equipment that gets donated to these countries and have an opportunity to keep it working and functioning in a low resource setting. So this time we're doing our training on campus, bringing the students up to speed on their technical skills for repairing hospital equipment, but we're also developing a biomedical technician training program, which we're going to pilot with the biomedical technicians at Viola Hospital. And this will be in conjunction with Tonga National University, which has recently been formed over the past couple of years. And they would like to eventually offer this as a program that they support that teaches high school students how to become biomedical technicians.
Are you happy to just elaborate a little bit more on what you meant by working with people? Is that teaching them how to fix their equipment and keep it up to date? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, exactly, because there's a lot of programs out there where they send in teams of people that are trying to help and trying to make a difference. And these groups come in with a team. They might repair a bunch of equipment. They might build a clinic or outfit, a award or something like that. But then they leave, and the only thing that remains is a plaque on the wall. And most of the equipment in Tonga and all low resource settings is donated, and it's donated from countries all over the world. And this equipment comes in these large shipping containers. It may not be in good repair. It definitely doesn't come with any tech support or technical manuals or the consumables. And so what you have is a potential resource, but who's going to unload the shipping container? Who's going to stage it somewhere and then repair it? And how is that equipment going to get added to the fixed asset registry? How is it going to get distributed to another island or the clinic where it's needed? And all of that, they don't have enough biomedical technicians to do the job. So I'm hoping that by educating the people, we can get a workforce of biomedical technicians that are there year-round who can continue to maintain and repair the equipment, and they understand how it works and the health hazards, the risks, everything involved with it. And I think that's a better sustainable solution for supporting countries like Tonga.
As well as helping Tonga, will this be a challenge for the UC students who are going to go over?
Oh, absolutely. These opportunities are life-changing. The students that went in 2019 and 20, they say it has completely changed how they think about design. They're all going out into industry to design medical devices. As a new engineer or as a design engineer, the temptation is to make something really clever and unique, but after having to repair something that somebody else designed, it's like, why couldn't they have used standard fasteners? Why did they have to put the wire all the way in the back behind this weldment? Those types of things. And so now they think about, if this is going to be donated someday in some kind of a circular economy situation, is it fixable? Could someone take it apart, understand how to repair it? They put everything in places that it could be fixed. And they also understand that the world isn't the same as New Zealand. So in New Zealand, we have air-conditioned, sterile hospitals with all of the equipment, all of the medical expertise that's needed. When you go to Tonga, they might have just one nebulizer at a clinic, and they don't have any spare mouthpieces, so they have to use bleach and water to sterilize the one plastic mouthpiece that they have and use it over and over again. So it brings up a lot of questions for the students, like, does it have to be made out of plastic? Could we make something that was steam sterilizable in an autoclave? Or does it need a consumable at all? Could the device be redesigned? So I think it just makes a huge impact on the students and their world perspective.
Wellington Chocolate Factory, or WCF, which pioneered the ethical bean-to-bar chocolate, has announced it's sourcing more of its cacao supply from the Pacific. It's also doubling down on its commitment to transparency, impact, and producing some of New Zealand's best chocolate. It already has a grower partner initiative established, sourcing premium cocoa beans for its first single origin Vanuatu bar directly from farmers. Co-founder of WCF, Gabe Davidson, says success of this program and the improving infrastructure across the Pacific means they can now source the quantities of cocoa for its next growth stage. Mr. Davidson spoke with Don Wiseman.
Wellington Chocolate Factory, you're moving to the next stage in terms of your already close relationship with the Pacific. What are you doing?
From the beginning, it's nearly 11 years now, we've had a strong interest in cocoa from the Pacific. So this is more of a firming up of a long-term strategy to source most of our cocoa beans from the Pacific. It's an exciting time, and we've seen a lot of changes along the way.
You had a spectacular trip by yacht from Bougainville early on. Where are you getting most of your chocolate now?
Well, in the Pacific, most of our beans are currently coming from Vanuatu. We've also sourced from the Solomon Islands, Bougainville, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Fiji. Up until recently, we've sourced most of our cacao from Peru and the Dominican Republic. So, yeah, it's been a long process, and we're really excited to be focusing more on our neighbours in the Pacific.
So you won't get anything from South America. It'll be exclusively Pacific cocoa.
It's still it's a transition, but we're now majority from the Pacific and from our neighbours, and so we're less reliant on Peru and Dominican Republic. So our goal is to be exclusively the Pacific, with the exception we don't want to be too hard about it. If there's an interesting origin somewhere that we come across, then we'll explore that. But our focus is definitely for this upcoming year is to keep going in that direction.
You've for a long time had a focus on organics, but in the Pacific, while the product almost invariably is organic, it's not certified organic because that's a legal process producers have to go through, and I don't think many of them are big enough to justify that sort of bureaucratic involvement. How do you get around that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Don. There is interest from growers to transition to certified organic, but it's not practical at this point in time. I mean, the good thing about being so close is we can visit our suppliers regularly, and they certainly don't use the sort of pesticides, and they grow organically. And as you said, they don't have the certification at this point in time. We will continue to use organic ingredients where possible. For example, our sugar is fair trade and organic. And like fair trade, the industry is in the early stages of growth and is working towards transitioning to organic certifications and the like.
Yeah. Now, as a result of horrendous weather, I think in Africa last year, crazy things happened to the price of cacao. Is that still a factor, or have those prices come back?
It is still a factor. There are a number of factors affecting the global cocoa price. We pay roughly 80% more than the farm gate price in West Africa, where most of the world's cocoa is grown. As part of our new transparency commitment, we're publishing our farm gate price annually. So we'll be paying, it changes, but roughly $5,500 per tonne, which is about 81% higher than the farm gate price. The cocoa shortage has put the price of cocoa up overall, but at this point in time, we're not seeing we have to increase our prices to be able to do what we're doing.
So the price of the end product?
Yes, our chocolate bar price at this point in time remains the same, but we plan to produce also some ultra premium Pacific bars in the future, so they'll be at a higher price point as well. But our decision to change our sourcing won't impact the current prices, but like all businesses, we may need to consider general price increases if required.
I know that the surge in returns for farmers in parts of the Pacific has had a huge impact in some environments, particularly in Bougainville, and there's been a lot of work going into trying to improve the farms themselves, and those farms lay idle for generations in Bougainville. And similar things right across the Pacific, I think, in terms of the interest and enthusiasm that there was for cocoa.
It's interesting you should mention Bougainville, because that's where it really started to get interesting for us. We had a friend come in who every day to drink hot chocolate, and she was working for the VSA over there. And there was a cocoa farmer who had planted his first tree, I think in 1950, and he was about to give up his farm because the commodity price was so low, it wasn't really worth it. So we went over there. The quality of his cacao was absolutely delicious, and he hadn't heard of the craft chocolate revolution. James Rutana really wanted to have a direct trade between Bougainville and New Zealand, and he said, well, why don't you learn to sail, borrow a sailing boat and pick up a ton of cocoa? No one can stop you. We could then put Bougainville on the sacks of cocoa and release the first ever single origin Bougainville bar. He was only half joking, and that turned into what was supposed to be a 6-week voyage turned into a 3-month voyage on a traditional vaka from Fiji using star navigation. So in that voyage, we were so honoured to have the opportunity to pull into from Fiji to Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, up to Bougainville and back down ultimately to Taranaki and Wellington. We got to meet a lot of the growers along the way. And as you say, there's been a lot of work put into creating that second segment. You've got your commodity market and then the specialty cacao, which is what we focus on, where we can offer a higher price to the farmers. So there's an annual chocolate festival. The first one started in Solomon Islands, where we've been asked to judge a few times. And it's a really exciting time for growers. And it'll help create a more sustainable industry and encourage young people to stay working in the family business.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For more episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tōwha soifua.